The trees stood like skeletal fingers, their branches etched against the pale blue sky like the delicate lines on an ancient tomb. The air was heavy with an unsettling stillness, as if the very wind itself had been frozen in time. I shivered, despite the warmth of my leather jacket, and glanced down at the dusty road that stretched out before me. The signpost in the distance read Raven's Peak in faded letters, with an arrow pointing towards the village that lay beyond. I had been driving for hours, and the GPS had led me down a series of increasingly rural roads, until I finally stumbled upon this forgotten place. The silence was oppressive, and I felt a growing sense of unease as I stepped out of my car. As I walked towards the village, the houses seemed to loom over me, their windows like empty eyes staring back. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath my feet. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see some shadowy figure lurking just out of sight. The village was eerily quiet, with no signs of life anywhere. I walked down the main street, my footsteps echoing off the buildings, and noticed that the doors and windows were all sealed with thick coats of dust. It was as if the villagers had vanished overnight, leaving behind only their abandoned homes. I approached the local diner, its neon sign creaking in the breeze like a mournful sigh. The door was locked, but I managed to pry it open with a bit of effort. Inside, the diner was a time capsule, with faded menus and dusty milkshake machines. A handwritten note on the counter read, "Closed for the season," but I knew that the season had long since passed. I wandered through the diner, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and grease, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. As I looked around, I noticed that the tables were set for a meal, with plates and glasses still clinking together. It was as if the diners had simply gotten up and left, in the middle of their meal. I decided to explore the rest of the village, to see if I could find any signs of life. But as I walked, I began to feel a creeping sense of dread. Every step seemed to echo through the empty streets, and I felt like I was being drawn deeper into some sort of trap. The houses seemed to be growing darker and more menacing, their shadows cast long and sinister across the ground. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, I saw it, a door that was slightly ajar, creaking open and shut in the breeze like a beckoning finger. I pushed the door open, and found myself in a small, dimly lit room. The air was stale, and the smell of decay hung heavy over everything. I fumbled for my flashlight and turned it on, casting a weak beam of light around the room. And that was when I saw it, a calendar, its pages torn and scattered across the floor. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the date on the calendar. It was yesterday's date. Yesterday's date, and the villagers were still missing. I stumbled backwards, my heart racing with fear, and that was when I heard the sound. It was a low, rasping noise, like the sound of someone clearing their throat. I spun around, trying to see who was making the sound, but there was no one there. And then, I heard it again. This time, it sounded like someone was whispering my name. The darkness seemed to coalesce around me, and I felt a presence closing in. I tried to run, but my legs were frozen in place. And then, the lights went out, plunging me into total darkness. When they flickered back on, I was alone in the room. The calendar was still torn, but the date had changed. It was today's date. And I was not alone.